So as we defined in our last lesson, we're going to want roles and movie statuses to exist before anything else inside of our database. Additionally, we're also going to have specific values for those two tables as well. We're going to have specific roles inside of our application, and then we're also going to have specific statuses that a movie can have. And the approach that we took to create records in the last lesson by jumping into a REPL session and creating them that way isn't a scalable way if you're working with a team. If you're a single person working on an application, it's fine. But if you have other members of your team that's going to need to spin up a same instance of your database and get populated quickly with that same information, that's where seeders come into play. Seeders allow you to define that information that you're going to need inside of your application. You can run the seeder to create that information automatically so that you don't have to have somebody jump into a REPL session, create that information themselves. They can just run the seeder and it will be automatically created for them. So within our terminal, let's go ahead and create a new seeder. First, let's do node ace list to see our available options. We're going to be making something, so we'll look underneath the make section, and sure enough, there's a make seeder. Node ace make seeder. Now, how you define your seeders is completely up to you. You can either have a single seeder that's going to make everything that you need to get started with your application, or you can divide individual seeders per resource that you're going to have that you need to create information for. So for example, we could create a single seeder for our roles and a single seeder for our movie statuses, or we could create a single seeder to create both of those informations for us. Since we're just getting started here, let's just focus on a single seeder. So let's just make a start seeder. Okay, there we go. So now we have a new seeder file at databases, seeders, start_seeder. We can go ahead and jump into our text editor and jump into our database directory, seeders, and there's our start seeder. You'll see that it's exporting a default class that extends a base seeder. The base seeder is going to provide the functionality to actually allow us to execute this. And then it's providing an async run method where we can create our movie statuses and our roles. And we can use our models for both of these. And we can do so similarly to how we did in the REPL session. So we can await, import our role from our role model, we have a create method that we can call, and we just need to pass the values in. So we could do name, administrator, so on and so forth as we did in the REPL session. But additionally, there's also a create many option as well, where we can pass in an array of those objects. So if we had two roles to make, we could pass in two objects to create them, which matches exactly what we have. So let's go ahead and do this. So we could do name user and name administrator, or let's just do admin because I find it rather hard to type out administrator for some reason. There we go. Give that a save. And if you'll recall back inside of our user migrations, let's dive into our migrations there and click on our users one. We gave our roles for our users a default value of 1, which essentially, if we jump over to our start seeder, is going to be the user role. If we wanted something to fail whenever we try to create our base seeder, if 1 cannot be assigned to the user role, we could explicitly assign the ID here to cause that failure to happen. Remember, whenever we inserted using the create method, the ID was automatically assigned for us. We didn't have to manually assign it, so you do not have to manually assign this. If there are instances though where you want this to fail, if it cannot be assigned a specific ID, that's where you can explicitly assign the ID. And since our user default value is dependent on 1 being there, we'll go ahead and do that here. So we can explicitly assign our user role as 1 and our admin role as 2. So let's pause here and take a look at exactly that, because we already have a user role with an ID of 1, so we will expect this to actually fail. So let's jump into our terminal. Let's go ahead and clear things out. Actually, before we do that, let's scroll up a little bit so that we can see the command. And this is going to be underneath the DB section. We have DB seed, and by default, this will execute all seeders within our application. If we take a look at the help method for that, we can run specific seeders. So node ace db seed -- help. There we go. You could specify individual files that you want to run for a specific seeder file. If there's just one particular one that you want to run, you could do that. There's also an interactive mode. And if you have separate connections, you could specify the connection as well. Okay, cool. So let's go and clear that out. And let's do node ace db seed. Again, expecting this to fail. And there we go. So it failed with our start seeder, and it was trying to insert roles with the column specified with the values, returning ID, and the specific reason for the failure is a duplicate key violates unique constraint for that primary key ID, i.e. it could not assign the ID of 1 to our user here whenever it tried to create it. If we were to get rid of that ID, give this a save. Let's jump back into our terminal and let's run node ace db seed once more. Everything should work, which indeed it did. It completed our seeder. But if we jump into pgadmin once more and hit play to run this query again, you'll see that these two bottom records are the ones that were created from our seeder, and they were assigned an ID of 3 and 4. Skipping 2 because 2 was deleted already. So if we did not have this first record here, we would only have roles with an ID of 3 and 4 within our database. So that's where that explicitly assigning a value inside of your seeder may come in handy. But for the most part, you should be able to ignore assigning IDs onto information because the database will take care of that automatically for you. So since we're explicitly expecting our role and our admin to have IDs 1 and 2, we can define this additionally using an enum. So within our app directory, let's create a new folder. So we'll do a new file here. We'll call the folder enums, and we'll call the file roles. We can hit enter there, and let's define an enum called roles. Let's do our curly braces, and let's define our user is going to equal 1, and our admin will equal 2. And let's go ahead and export default our roles. Essentially what this will allow us to do is, let's say we want to check whether or not somebody's an admin. Well, now we have an explicit reference to what role inside of our application specifies who's an admin. So let's assume that we have a user variable here. We could do user.roleID equals roles.admin to discern if somebody is specifically an admin inside of our application. So now that we have that, we can jump into our seeder, and we can assign the IDs using the enum. So we can do roles. Let's import that from our enums directory. And let's actually scroll up a little bit. So that did a relative import. Let's go ahead and add a subpath import for our enums directory. So we can scroll down to our package.json. We'll do this just above exceptions. So we'll do hash enums /* app enums star.js. Give that a save. We can go ahead and give that a copy as well. Let's dive down to our tsconfig. And we'll do the exact same thing within here. So we'll give that a paste and just wrap the value inside of an array. Cool. So now we can give that a save, jump back into our start seeder, and switch this to a subpath import. So we can do hash enums and get rid of the extension. Okay, cool. So let's dive back down to our role creation here and finish out our thoughts. So roles dot, and let's assign the ID here for our user as user and for our admin as roles.admin. We can do the exact same thing within our users migration. So if we go back to that file, let's dive into our database, migrations user, scroll over to where we have that hard one, and let's do roles, import that from our enums roles dot, and let's assign them the user role. So not only does this make things easier to read, we now know just by simply looking at it that our default role for our users is going to be the user role, but we also have a safeguard throughout our application via our start seeder that we know explicitly that the user role is going to have an ID of 1, otherwise it's going to fail to create, and the same for our admin with the ID of 2. Okay, next we need to do the exact same thing for our movie statuses. So let's go ahead and jump back up. And let's define an enum for that first so that we have that same safeguard going on for those. So we'll do movie underscore statuses.ts, enum movie statuses, and let's do writing equals 1, casting equals 2, production equals 3, we'll have post-production as 4, and then finally released as 5. And let's export default movie statuses just like so. So now we have a hard definition on what status represents the movie is being written, movie is being casted cast members, the movie is being produced, so actually going through filming, post-production, and released. Let's jump into our seeder and actually get those created. So I'm just going to condense down our role create many here, and we can do await movie status, import our model for that, dot create many, our array, and we'll do objects for these. Scroll down slightly here, ID, movie statuses, there we go, import that enum, dot, and we'll go in the same order as our IDs, so we'll do writing first, writing, ID, movie statuses, dot, casting, name, casting, scroll down a little bit more, ID, movie statuses, dot, production, name, production, then we have post-production, so movie post-production there. Okay, and then lastly we have released, so ID. I've just kind of given up on writing movie statuses and I'm just kind of using autocomplete there to round it out for me there. And then we'll do released for that value there, and name released. Okay, cool. Give that a save. Everything should get their auto commas added in. And now we should be good to go. So first, before we actually run this, if we dive back into pgadmin here, we're going to want to clear out the roles that we already have defined inside of this table and reset the IDs for this table as well. So let's hide pgadmin back away because we can't just simply delete them, as that won't reset the IDs, which use sequences to keep track of what ID is next in the sequence. So we can jump back into our terminal here, hide our text editor back away, clear this out, and let's use our node ace list to list out our available commands. And we have our migration commands here at our disposal to do this for us. So first let's try refresh. Essentially that's going to roll back. So we'll run the rollback command and then we'll run our migration. So we'll run the run command essentially automatically within that single command. So we'll do node ace migration refresh, hit enter there. Okay, that reverted all of our migrations and remigrated them. So if we dive back into pgadmin and hit run, we no longer have any information inside of our database, so we can hide that back away. And let's try node ace db seed. And there we go. Everything worked a-okay. Let's jump back into pgadmin, hit run once more. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with pgadmin there. Let's go into view all rows again. Oh, we probably just need to refresh everything since we remigrated it. So let's jump back up to our database, right click on that and hit refresh. Okay, scroll back down and let's try again on our roles table. So let's right click that, view edit, all rows. There we go. Okay, so we just needed to refresh pgadmin here to let it know because it was trying to reference the old tables that no longer existed. So we just needed to give it a refresh there. Okay, cool. So we have our user record with 1 and our admin record with 2. And we can jump into our movie statuses. So right click there, view edit, all rows. And we have all 5 of those here as well with writing, casting, production, post-production, and released, all with their explicit IDs that we expect. Awesome. So everything's working there. And since we created these using our Lucid models, our created at and updated at were automatically added in for us. Awesome.